Welcome to the Natural History Institute. My name is Nikki Check. I'm the development of director. I'm the director of development. It's been a long day. I also want to point out a couple of other people in the room. We've got Tom Fleischner, who is our founding director here. He'll be available to answer some questions afterwards. And hiding in the dark back there is Miss Jenny Two-Tone, who checked you in. These are key people in our team, so if you have any questions about our organization or about some of the things I'm about to tell you about, you can reach out to us after the talk. First of all, a couple of housekeeping items. Restrooms are over there, but you can't access them this way. You'd have to walk all the way around the hallway to find our drinking fountain and restrooms. And another thing to mention is Ken Gorsica's beautiful art show will be up in the gallery through January 13th. So if you haven't had a chance to stop in and see that, it's really a beautiful show. We'll turn the lights on in there after this talk as well. Coming up next Wednesday, December 14th at 6 p.m. is the second installment of Science in Conversation webinar series, Secrets of Sunflowers, a natural history of sunflowers. I love this. So program director Jessie Rack will be in conversation with botanist Dr. Nora Mitchell about her work on sunflowers and the natural history behind her science. So this is an online program. You'll have to register with a link. If you're not on our newsletter, you are free to sign up. We have a clipboard at the front. Finally, if you like what you hear tonight and want to experience a little bit more of Kino Bay for yourself, we have NHI's first Touchstone tour in 4 years.
Wow.
Coming up, and it's headed to Kino Bay. So it's a pretty exciting opportunity led by our own Tom Fleischner and Science Director Lisa Floyd-Hanna. Registration opens tonight. And so if you're interested, you can talk with us afterwards. I'll give you a few more details once the talk is over. And also something to consider is that you'll have an opportunity to get on the center's newsletter after this as well. So without further ado, let me introduce Kino Bay Center, Speaker Lorayne Meltzer. It's really been a long day.
It's okay.
So Lorayne Meltzer is the director of Prescott College's Kino Bay Center. She's active in collaborative conservation efforts in the Gulf of California. Lorayne coordinates the center's research, education, and community outreach programs towards the realization of the mission and vision of Prescott College and the Kino Bay Center. But the center is also an NGO. So autonomously it hosts 1,500 visitors annually, including students, researchers, community members, and local groups. Lorayne is also an avid surfer. So it's just something to consider through this talk. So without further ado, I give you Lorayne Meltzer and her talk, The Biocultural Riches of the Gulf of California, Mexico.
Okay, can you hear me? Is my mic on? Okay, should I just talk a little bit louder? Can you all hear me? Okay, great. Well, it's great to see so many familiar and some new faces today. Thank you all so much for coming out on this chilly, what is to me a very chilly night. I'm going to be talking about the biocultural riches of the Gulf of California. And to start with, I want to just take a minute to define what I mean by biocultural. So when we talk about biocultural diversity, we're really looking at the overlap or the relationship between the biological, right, the plants, the animals, the ecosystems, and the cultural and the linguistic, or the ways of knowing, speaking about, and understanding the world around us. So tonight's talk is going to be about both of those things overlapped in the Gulf of California, a place that's very near and dear to my heart. And so I'm just going to take you on a little bit of a tour. I love to see out here in the audience if anybody has a question in the end that I can't answer. There's so many experts in this room that can answer the question. So just an introduction to the Gulf of California. The Gulf of California is a place of incredible beauty, of striking contrasts, surprises, transitions, and discoveries. It's a place of enormous ecological importance and a place that's deeply important to many humans. As an example, for the Konkak people, they know this place, also known as the Seri, as the center of the world, right? So the god Anthai asked the animals, when the planet was just consisting of water, to go down to the bottom of the ocean, and it was the sea turtle that was successful at bringing up the grains of sand that created land, Tiburon Island, as the center of the world. So that tells you a little bit about their relationship to this place. The Gulf of California is also an economy. In the early 20th century, the Mexican government incentivized northwestern expansion and also the development of small-scale commercial fishing. And still today, small-scale commercial fishing forms the base of the economy of the Gulf of California. So most people in the Gulf of California exist from small-scale fishing. The Gulf of California is a classroom and a place to learn, a place of inquiry and discoveries, Yay. And also of adventure. You guys know what that little bird is? Okay, more on that bird later. Okay. The Gulf of California, for the Spanish explorers and later the missionaries, and after them the ranchers, and more recently the neoliberal global economy, has been a place to conquer. It's a place of relationships. Come on, that's ridiculous. A booby, yeah, okay, you got that one. Oh, did you see the blue feet? Oh no, it's a brown booby, sorry. All right, some relationships that are very touching and some that are incredibly unlikely. For me, the Gulf of California has been a place where I've had the good fortune to grow both personally and professionally. Can you still hear me? Okay. Over the past 35 years, I've been so fortunate to be able to combine exploration of the landscapes and the seascapes with the study of natural history, science, and I guess what's most near and dear to my heart is doing conservation in a collaborative way, right? And working with the people from the communities, whether it's the Mexican fishermen or the Konkak elders, students, scientists, and government people to really figure out how to, maybe foster healthy relationships, healthy ways of interacting with the marine environment. So, yes, I'm the executive director of Prescott College's Kino Bay Center, and I'm also a faculty member in the environmental studies program. And I do a lot of things in those roles, probably like any of you that, work on scrubbing floors or doing all sorts of things, right? But most of it leads towards what I was just talking about, co-creating solutions to really challenging situations, socio-environmental issues in the region. Could you be a little bit louder? Yeah, okay, I'll try. Maybe you can turn me up a little bit back there, yeah. How many of you guys have ever been to the Kino Bay Center? Okay, so there are people in this room that knew the Kino Bay Center in 1991 when Prescott College first got there, right? I know there's a bunch of you. And I know there's people in the room that were there just a couple of weeks ago or a couple of months ago when it looks like it does down here in 2022. So this represents a long-term commitment on the part of Prescott College to making this place a place that can support so many people's growth, both professionally, personally, and so many different ways. So I'm going to geography, right? We know we're in Mexico, one of the most biodiverse countries in the on the planet. And zooming in a little bit to the Gulf of California, this is an approximately 800-mile body of water that's bordered by 4 Mexican states. Baja California, which is not Baja California Norte, that's a mistake. Baja California Sur, Sonora, and Sinaloa. And to the north, we can see the Arizona border and the California border. And as we look at it from this point of view, we can zoom in and see where the Kino Bay Center is located, right there, that's surrounding Tiburon Island, where the center of the universe for the Concac people, and also the largest island in Mexico, the size of Delaware, I think. And when we zoom in even further with Tiburon Island there on the right, we can see the Midriff Island Region of the Gulf of California. It's the most narrow section of the Gulf of California, and it's characterized by all of these islands that I'm going to talk about in just a bit. And you can see the deep sea trenches that go down to anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 feet, and they're created by the spreading centers that happen throughout the Gulf of California. So Baja is on the Pacific plate, and Sonora is on the continental plate. Just about a month ago, we had a 6.4, right? Was that it? 6.4 earthquake, right? And so what's happened, and it was right there off of San Pedro Martir, that teeny little island there. So as the plates are moving away from each other, there are these spreading centers that create these deep sea trenches, and that provokes a lot of upwelling and productivity that supports everything that I'm about to show you. Not Maria. Maria is one of the photographers. I want to take a minute to just do a shout out and give credit to the photographers who have photos in this show. Almost all of them, well, all of them existed at the Kino Bay Center as either students and or staff members and took what I think are just a series of really, really beautiful photos. So the rest of this show is going to take you a little bit on a tour of different ecosystems and the beauty of those ecosystems, the ecological importance, and then I'll talk a little bit also about that biocultural relationship. We're going to travel through deserts, estuaries, near-shore environments, intertidal environments, and the open sea. And we're going to start with estuaries. So most of you probably know that estuaries are created at the terminus of rivers, and so they're where rivers meet the ocean. And in a lot of places, the estuaries are less saline than the ocean, right? Because fresh water is coming in. But all of our estuaries are negative estuaries. They're more saline because no water flows to them anymore. They were created by historical rivers. And another interesting thing about our estuaries is that they have both salt marsh plants and mangrove plants. So estuaries in the tropics are characterized by mangroves, and estuaries in the temperate latitudes are characterized by salt marshes. But here we have a transition zone, even though we're 5 degrees north of the tropics, because the Baja Peninsula creates this shelter for us. So these estuaries are, on top of being strikingly beautiful, very important for nesting wading birds like the roseate spoonbill and the yellow-crowned night heron. We also have black-crowned night herons nesting. And they're also very, very important for wintering and migratory shorebirds like the American avocet. And okay, you're going to have to help me out here, Walt. I think they're all Dunlins.
Yeah, mostly, but there might be...
A western sandpiper? That's what I thought. Okay, I'm learning. I'm getting there. And so these birds travel 4,000 miles or more to get to the estuaries in the Gulf of California. And if we're able to show that we have more than 1% of any one species population using our estuaries, that helps qualify the estuaries as internationally protected or important estuaries under the Ramsar Convention of the United Nations. So in addition to appreciating and loving and drawing and writing about these birds, we're also studying them. The center has a water bird monitoring program that's has its roots with Doug Humes doing his senior project on cormorants in I think 1974. But this is Jaime Martinez and Lauren Dolinsky, who are our current waterbird monitoring team. And so they're collecting data that we have now going back 25 years that can then show trends, that can inform management, but that can also help protect the habitat for birds. And then birds like the reddish egret that nest on islands, and they feed in the estuaries. So I used to think that the reddish egret was just a common bird that you saw everywhere. But then I realized that it's just a common bird you see everywhere in Kino. And it's actually it's a threatened bird, right? So our habitat is very important for them. And this is just one of my favorite all-time birds, the black skimmer. We just saw about 50 of them in Laguna La Cruz the other day. And they're coming, again, they're migrating down from the northern part of North America, even as far as the northeastern part of North America, if I'm not mistaken. And so the elegant terns that are, famous in certain circles for nesting on Isla Raza, in the wintertime, they'll come and feed in the estuary. So we're still talking about estuaries, so you can just see the enormous importance of these estuaries. And this was a site that we saw just the other day in Laguna La Cruz, the biggest estuary closest to the Kino Bay Center, white pelicans that migrate down or that travel down from inland lakes and they're very common in the winter and spring in the Gulf of California. So in addition to birds, which are very visible and very beautiful and very legally protected, they're very good tools for conservation, these estuaries are really important for fish and for fisheries. They are where most of the fish that are commercially sought after spawn. So the corbina, that's a big target fish in the Gulf of California, Lisa, mullet, they all spawn in the estuaries, or they all reproduce in the estuaries, as do most of the elasmobranchs, or sharks and rays. And shrimp put their larvae in the inner reaches and in the interior of the estuaries, and then they change life forms 8 times approximately before they reach the bay, before they reach the open sea. And crabs, also blue swimming crab, do the same. Not 8 times, but they breed they reproduce in the summertime in the estuaries, and then they move out to the bay, where they're a very important source of food and income for local fishermen. This is a very small oyster aquaculture operation that happens in the estuaries. This is an extraordinarily small-scale, low-input operation where they put out oyster boxes and then they row out to them and cultivate them, and they're eating just from the estuary. There's no nutrients added. And even the medium-scale shrimp trawlers that are catching shrimp all for export, and I'll talk more about this again in a little minute, depend on the estuaries, right? Because without the estuaries, they wouldn't be able to have that product. So obviously, some of us go to these places and really just are inspired by the beauty and the peace and the quiet. Estuaries are very important for green sea turtles, in particular for feeding green sea turtles. And there's a network in Mexico that trains local community groups to monitor sea turtles and to protect sea turtles in about 50 different communities. It was started with 2 scientists who were coming down to the Gulf of California, Jeff Seminoff and Jay Nichols, to do a thesis. I can't remember if it was their master's or a PhD thesis. But when they got to the villages, they saw that they could collect data, but they were looking at mounds of turtle carapaces. And they said, well, we're going to have more of an impact doing community-based conservation work than we are doing science, or as much. And so they started this effort to get community members trained to do sea turtle conservation. And so Cosme Becerra, that I'm sure if you've ever been to Kino Bay, you know and love Cosme Becerra, is the leader of the local Grupo Tortuguero, or turtle group. And since 2010, they've tagged over 800 turtles. And the majority of those, this is important, pay attention, have been recaptured. More than once they've been found in the estuary. And 10% of them have been recaptured more than 3 times or more. So this is really important data, because before we thought that the turtles were migrating all over the Gulf of California, but these turtles haven't been recaptured anywhere else in any of the other 50 Grupo Tortugueros, only in this estuary. So that helps us know that, wow, they're using this estuary very significantly, and if we can protect this place, we can have an impact on the recovery of sea turtles. Now, they still, face threats of nets that are in the bay or of poachers, but this is a success story in conservation. Actually, Cosme won the National Conservation Award in Mexico a few years ago, which is pretty remarkable. I can't remember what year it is. Does that happen to any of you guys, that you can't remember what year something happened in? But we were sitting in an estuary, I think it was Santa Rosa, in a circle. I do this a lot, that has students and Mexican fishermen and scientists and Concac elders and Concac youth and a whole staff members from the Kino Bay Center. And the question was, why are estuaries important? And the students, being good Prescott College students, said all that stuff I just said. They're the nursery grounds for birds, that's where fish reproduce, all that stuff. And it came around in the circle to this elder Concac woman, Cleotilde, maybe some of you guys knew her, and she said they're important as a refuge. And we all understood a refuge for animals, for birds. And she said, no, this is where we hid during the period of the extermination, because the Concac were victims of genocide until the early 20th century. So the estuaries were the places where they could hide and they could find food sources, right? So that just kind of blew our minds, right? And it really underlined the importance of being able to learn about a place from so many different perspectives, and how fortunate we are to be able to learn from different perspectives, all of us. So the sandy beaches just outside the estuaries are important for sea turtle nesting. This is a different species. It's the olive ridley sea turtle that nests in huge arribadas, huge nesting events in Costa Rica and southern Mexico. But here they nest as solitary nesters, and they come up with the storm events in September. And the same Grupo Tortuguero is also protecting the nesting sites. And then they go out to sea. Well, sea turtles that nest in the area, specifically, that was the olive ridley, but specifically the leatherback, are also very important for the Concac. They have a legend that's depicted on this mural, where this young woman who was coming into the age of puberty, wandered away or ran away. I don't really know the story. I've heard it in different ways. But she was lost to her family. And when this leatherback turtle came ashore, they took it as a sign of a reconnection with their daughter. If anybody in Kino sees me and I'm butchering this story, I'm so sorry, but this is the way that I understand it. And so from then on, the sea turtle became the symbol for the puberty festival. So today, when they see a sea turtle, or now because they're so rare, sometimes they have to build one out of stone or out of wood. There's a 4-day celebration for all the women who have come of age recently to celebrate their womanhood. Islands. So, as I mentioned, the islands in the Midriff Island region are, in some circles, world known. If you study biogeography, these islands are fascinating, on the same level as the Galapagos Islands in Ecuador, in my humble opinion. No, they're well known. So the fascinating thing about all these islands is that not all islands are the same. They're all so different, and they all contribute to the ecology and to culture in so many different ways. Here they are labeled. And so, yeah, that's a Prescott College class down there. It's just a great little college in this funky town in Arizona. Anyway, so some islands are land bridge islands, like Tiburon Island, that huge island. It was once connected to the mainland. And so when it separated at the end, finally, at the end of the last ice age, which isn't that long ago, geologically speaking, right? The Gulf of California began to open 4 to 6 million years ago, but then this channel completely inundated, you know, at the end of the last ice age, 10,000 years ago approximately. So it's separated with all of its flora and fauna intact, right? So this island, according to the famous Dr. Ben Wilder, has over 300 species of plants. On the other side of the spectrum, you have San Pedro Martir, which is the most oceanic island in the Gulf of California. It's the furthest away from land. It's really small. It kind of had to start from zero, if you will, and it has about 29 species of plants. So you can sort of see the difference in the topography. On Isla Rasa, this is so well studied. The elegant terns nesting on Isla Rasa, Enriqueta Velarde reports 95% of the population of these birds at one time nested on Isla Rasa. Now they're starting to spread out a little bit, but this is a very well protected, very well documented species, and it's one of the things that I think is so interesting that Enriqueta has documented is the relationship between the success of the elegant tern nesting and El Nino events. So they can predict El Nino events because they don't nest as much because there's not as much sardine availability. So she's like yelling from the rooftops to get the fisheries managers to listen to the birds. All of the islands in our area, all of the islands in the Gulf of California are significant in one way or another for nesting seabirds. We spend a lot of time on islands looking at nesters. Okay, that's that same bird that they were looking at. Come on, somebody. Yeah, the Creveri's murrelet. So if the elegant terns are studied and we know everything about them, the Creveri's murrelet, there's 2 publications. One by the Tertius in the 1990s, and one by a Prescott College student. So this is one of the least studied endangered birds in our region, and so we're working off of 3 grants now to really go out to all the islands, look in nests and crevices, and try to document where they nest and get some estimates on how many there are in the world. So that's really exciting. It's kind of a frontier for science if you're down there. You can really learn a lot of new things, which, you know, that's nice. The double-crested cormorant is a species that we are looking at the productivity of the species in order to be able to say something about the productivity of fisheries as well. And then these guys are just so ugly cute. But the brown pelican is a bird that's studied throughout the Gulf of California. So this is one of the birds that is in coordinated efforts people are looking at to see how well the population is doing. Some of us in this room are old enough to remember when the brown pelicans were endangered because of eggshelling due to DDT. Look at all these nodding heads. See, my students, they look at me and they're like, what is she talking about? But now they're seemingly doing really well if you look at the numbers. But when you really take a look at it at more depth, the first year and the second year pelicans, there are way fewer of them. So the younger generations aren't doing as well. So on down the road, we're a little bit worried about how they're going to be.
Well, were the brown pelicans in that area 50 years ago suppressed?
Yes.
They were up here?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Actually, the leading researcher, the guy who's still leading this research at 80-something years old, Dan Anderson, was a toxicologist that helped discover that relationship between DDT and the eggshell thinning, and then he converted. He came over to the bird biology side, and he's been looking at pelicans ever since. So when you're working on islands and you're working with birds, you're working with nesting birds, because islands are such wonderful places for nesting birds because there's rarely predators. These islands don't have, with some exceptions, introduced predators, and I'll talk about that in a minute. But the American oyster catcher, it puts its very camouflaged eggs right on the edge of the shore, so they're very susceptible to disturbance or to people stepping on the eggs. They're not seen, and then they nest always during Easter week, so they need a lot of protection. The quasi-endemic, semi-endemic yellow-footed gull has the cutest little chicks in the entire world. Oh, there they go. All right, and then if some species of birds are really well known, again, the petrels, the storm petrels, not very much known about them, but they're beautiful and they happen in association with marine mammals a lot. A lot of people come to Kino because they want to see the blue-footed booby, right? And the blue-footed booby, the largest colony of blue-footed boobies in the Gulf, if not the world, is on San Pedro Martir, relatively accessible to us. So we take a lot of people that are crazy about birds to see blue feet. And red bills. The red-billed tropic bird is another bird that people come to see in our region. And the red-billed tropic bird nests on San Pedro Martir, and it nests in ground cavities. So on San Pedro Martir, that island in the middle of the ocean, before there were chemically based or synthetic fertilizers, people were put on San Pedro Martir, indigenous people, as slaves to scrape guano off rocks to help make fertilizer. And in so doing, rats were introduced to that island, black rats. And so there were millions of black rats on the island. And so if you've got black rats and you've got a ground nesting bird, that's not a good combination, right? So in 2007, a nonprofit organization called Grupo de Ecología y Conservación de Islas, I think that would be the Conservation and Ecology of Islands group. They're the leading group in Mexico that does eradications of exotic species off of islands. They learned what they know in New Zealand. Anyway, they came and they did this eradication over 2 weeks in the Gulf. And it was interesting to have a group of students, marine conservation students, throwing poison at an island, right? But it was effective, and to this day, they're still not finding any black rats on the island, and we have seen those Crevarius murulates nesting again on San Pedro Martir. They were not documented in the 90s on San Pedro Martir, so on the main island, they're nesting again. And we don't have studies on the red-billed tropic birds, but I was out there, and everywhere you look, there's red-billed tropic birds nesting, so I think that the eradication was successful. California sea lions reproduce on islands in the Gulf of California. The largest sea lion colony, about 6,000 sea lions now, is on San Esteban Island. They're very playful. Fishermen don't like them because, but they, at the same time, they joke with themselves because they're saying, well, we got rid of all the sharks. Sharks have been fished out almost completely. And so the California sea lion doesn't have very many predators, save the orcas, except for the orcas. So, you know, there's a lot of sea lions pilfering from nets, and they don't like that too much. So another reason why islands are very well studied is because of the prevalence of endemic species or species that live nowhere else in the world, right? They're isolated, so they have time to speciate or to become their own species, like this San Esteban chuckwalla, or this spiny iguana, a mammillaria cactus. So these are all genetically tested to only live on their islands or on 1 or 2 different islands. So that's very important for biodiversity because you have more ability to adapt and resist change. He's a cutie. Collared lizard. But this is everybody's favorite endemic species in the entire world. It's the only species of bat that eats marine fish in the entire world. That's just crazy, right? And it turns out that they're endemic to the Gulf of California, and they exist on almost every island, but most significantly on Isla Partida, where they found up to 40,000 of these bats. Another extraordinarily well-studied species, thanks to Jose Juan Martinez and all of his students, but crazy thing. So deserts on islands exist in the same places. So this is Isla Tiburon. And I think, Tom, you were the one that told me that Isla Tiburon is the largest uninterrupted, non-grazed by cattle piece of the Sonoran Desert. So there are bighorn sheep and there are deer, there's hoofed animals, but it's not subject to grazing. So it's an excellent laboratory to explore and to study plants. If any of you get the chance to see the Green Planet, you guys look like a crowd, like maybe some of you have seen it. You've probably seen Ben Wilder did a little piece with David Attenborough on the relationship between cactus and seabirds. It's really worth watching. But Ben, after Richard Felger, is the one that's done all of the cataloging of the different plants and species on the islands. But Vilma and Rosita Lopez are descendants of Alfredo Lopez, one of the holder of the knowledge of the Concac in terms of plants. So the Lopez family holds the knowledge on the Council of Elders of all of the medicinal uses of plants, of all of the dyes and which dyes make what color to go with which baskets. And Rita has, where's your stuff? So today, Rita just bought these from Valentina. These are ointments that they now make. This is a creosote, and this one is a combination, and I don't know what it's of. But the amazing wisdom of what you can use a mangrove for and what you can use the roots of what plant for to be able to deal with, during COVID it was really significant because they had so many herbs and teas that they could use for pulmonary issues. Okay, moving along. The pitaya is a fruit. The Concac were a hunting and gathering group, Alfredo, that I mentioned before, and I realized that while the last year that he was still hunting and gathering on Tiburon Island, living on Tiburon Island and making a living as a hunter-gatherer, I was in high school in New York City. And so between then and now, all of his descendants have just been catapulted through time. And you think of what people have to adapt to and changed over time. These are the kinds of favorite moments of mine when you have a Concac elder teaching alongside a Prescott College teacher with Concac students, Mexican students, Prescott College students, all kind of learning from different perspectives. This is what floats my boat. Same story here. Ben Wilder, Humberto Morales, and a group of students. Okay, switching gears. This region, because of the upwellings, because of the depth that I was talking about, is also very important for marine mammals. 25% of all of the marine mammals in the world are found in Mexico, and we have documented somewhere around 18 of those in the Midriff Island region. Sort of our signature species are the bottlenose dolphin and the fin whale. Hector Perez, who took all these pictures and has been the marine mammal biologist at the Kino Bay Center for the past 14 years, has cataloged 369 individual fin whales. So that tells us he's determining that it's a resident population in the Gulf of California. Oh, what happened? And so what they're doing in our region mostly is feeding. These are baleen whales that are feeding off of krill, so that's the mouth. And they open the mouth and they gulp in, which creates a vacuum, and so all the water is pulled in, and then they expel that water out of their mouths, and their baleen acts as a strainer, and all the krill all the shrimp-like things stay behind. They're very large. Yeah, blue whales. Orcas, we see orcas every year. No, I don't. You know what? We don't really know too much about the residency patterns of the orcas or where they're traveling to, but I'm going to find out for you from Hector where else they're seen. The bottlenose dolphin reproduce in our area. Sperm whales are an interesting story because if you came to Kino before 2015 and you went to San Pedro Martir, you saw sperm whales. 100 of them, 80 of them, 60 of them, they're always there. Since 2015, we haven't seen them. They prey on the giant squid, and the giant squid are known to shift where they live, and also they've been victim of overfishing. No more giant squid, and so the sperm whales have left the region. But Hector tells me that he's in a consortium of sperm whale biologists, and he was talking with these people in Ecuador, and that this is not the first time that the sperm whales have gone out of the Gulf and then come back. So there's hope. We're hopeful that we will see them again because they're remarkable. The pilot whales are in the same boat. They are deep water feeders, and we haven't seen them. I haven't seen them since 2016. The open water is also a great place to see rays and sharks and lots of fish and birds feeding on fish. And in the open waters, we have two medium to large scale fisheries, the sardine fishery, which is a purse seine fishery that circles an entire school of sardines. And this fishery, 80% of what they catch now, it goes to make meal. So to make like a purina, like a meal that feeds aquaculture shrimp, and all of that shrimp gets exported to the United States or Asia. And that's a similar story to shrimp trawling. Shrimp trawling is it trawls on the bottom. There's 235 different species of other things. 84% of what they catch is not shrimp. 100% of that is exported to the United States and to Asia. So that's what a typical set. We just had students out on a trawler last month, and they sort through all this, and 84% is what we got in November this year. And so ecologically, the impact is huge here. From the sardine fishery, all those birds, all those dolphins, they rely on sardines, right? And all the fish that the fishermen catch rely on sardines. So this is a very, very familiar story in the impacts of the global economy, because the impact, the ecological impact and the economic impact stays locally, where the profits and the food source gets exported internationally. So at the Kino Bay Center, these are the kinds of issues that we're unpacking. They have so many dimensions. They have social justice dimensions. They have ecological and scientific dimensions. And we're kind of listening, right? Opening dialogue circles to see what everybody's perspectives are on these things. And then from a variety of different programs, we're trying to promote and model equitable collaborations between people from different cultures and institutions to co-create solutions to complex socio-environmental challenges. These are the programs that we have. Like she said, we have 1,500 people per year that come, and you can be one of them, so you can come visit us. In this circle, there's Duke University students, Prescott College students, staff members. I think the president of Prescott College and a donor trip is there. Some independent researchers from the University of California, Santa Cruz. So this is not an unusual experience, and this is what I really... Oh yeah, always a dog. Always at least one dog. Yes, if you want to come adopt a pet, Kino is a great place to come. Okay, so as I click through these final images, I invite you to think about your own relationships with any of these environments or any of these biocultural themes, or maybe to think about your relationship with biocultural tapestries in the places where you go. This is the Kino Bay Center staff, minus a couple of people. And it's a really wonderful crew of people to work with, so many different perspectives. And we couldn't do any of this without our funders. The Kino Bay Center operates 50 to 60% on donations and grants. Any questions? In the back.
Lorayne, thank you so much for sharing with us.
You're welcome.
I just want to remind, when we have a question, if you could repeat it back
Oh, okay.
so that it's captured.
Okay.
What relationship do you have with data sharing and what have you with SATO in Rocky Point?
Okay, so what relationship do we have with data sharing and whatnot with SATO in Rocky Point? Well, it is a sister institution of ours, literally. The director for 40 years was my sister-in-law. So I think more than data sharing, well, and then Ed Boyer did all of his research in Rocky Point and now was a director at the Kino Bay Center and teaches there, so his data's there. More of the relationship in my era with SATO has been as a sister NGO trying to address conservation issues. So coming together to on more of a political agenda to try to address overfishing and things like that. But yeah, even Nelito's the new director there, and we are in the same networks and things like that. Any other questions? Okay.
Well, I'll take another one. I was waiting for somebody else's hand to go up. But I mentioned Rocky Point because we had some familiarity with it, but the estuaries would empty and fill 2 or 3 times, and that has a lot to do with the nutrients and the food that are coming in and going out. Are the estuaries that you were showing us, do they have a similar activity?
Yes. Great. So the estuaries in Rocky Point do fill and empty with the tides, and do the estuaries in our region act in the same way? Yes and no. Yes, in that the tides, we have mixed semi-diurnal tides in Kino also, so twice a day the tide comes in and twice a day the tide goes out. The difference is that in the northern Gulf, the tidal extension is 3 times bigger than what we have in Kino, so we don't see the dramatic tidal changes that you see in the northern Gulf. But yeah, the tides bring the nutrients out, the nutrients from the estuaries out, and then bring the creatures back in twice a day.
I remember 50 years ago sailing around there. The Scripps had an oceanographic vessel doing operations. Do you interact with organizations like that?
Yeah. So you remember 50 years ago, Scripps sailing. This is awkward. Sailing around the Gulf, doing scientific studies, and do we have relationships with organizations like that? Yeah, as a matter of fact, Sarah Mesnick, who works at NOAA and has a relationship with Scripps, we're just sending back shrimp samples for her. This is an example of a relationship, right? Because although shrimp fishing is illegal in the northern Gulf, they're seeing that apparently that they're still fishing for shrimp in the northern Gulf and then coming and having the people that have the permits in the central Gulf taking those shrimp to market. So she asked us to get shrimp so that she could do genetic analysis on where it comes from. And then, of course, so many wonderful studies come out of Scripps and NOAA, and they still do research cruises in the Gulf periodically. Peter.
Do dynamics with the Colorado River extend so far south, directly or indirectly?
Do dynamics with the Colorado River extend as far south as our area in the Gulf? You're going to have to help me with that question. The spawning events of like the Totoaba and the Corvina that where the fish go up to the northern Gulf and then come back around to the southern Gulf, that's a way that there's mixing. A lot of the sediment, that used to come down through the Colorado doesn't come down anymore. So I heard from Rick Brusca that that used to extend more into the Central Gulf. I think now it doesn't as much. But I'm going to turn to the illustrious Ed Boyer to help me out on that question.
Why, Peter, thank you for asking. I guess I would say it used to, and that there was reports of being able to see the plume of water as far south as La Paz, back maybe 100 years ago. But the flow, at this point, the flow is basically zero.
So is the northern part becoming more saline?
That I don't know.
But probably. It's definitely becoming less sedimented. You know, there's less sediment in the water, and the habitat's very, very different than it was 100 years ago when 250,000 CFS used to come down through the Colorado River and end up in the Delta. And now you get a trickle of agricultural runoff, you know, according to the Colorado River Compact, you know. They have to send 1,500 acre feet down every year. So you just get a trickle. I love the questions. Do I get to call on? Mary and then the person in the back.
I'm remembering, I'll speak loud, I'm remembering that there was a local person from Kino, I don't know if it was Nueva Vieja, who came to Prescott College to get her master's. Have there been other, like, local folks who have gotten engaged in the, or to what extent have they gotten engaged in sort of the research or the education or whatever?
Okay, so there, you remember a student from Kino who came to Prescott College and did their undergraduate work here at Prescott College, and are there other locals that are getting involved in the research and the conservation and the education? Definitely yes. It's actually our mission, our focus, our drive right now is to get as many local people involved in running the research and the conservation projects based on their own priorities and needs, and us being the center and the students and external researchers supporting them. So that's to really, I would say, give responsibility to the local people from the bottom up, and also to generate an alternative economy to overfishing. The goal is to have an economy that's based around conservation as an alternative to overexploitation, and we're seeing, you know, I would say now there's at least 15 to 20 people in Kino and Punta Chueca that make their full-time living off of conservation and education. And most of them are involved with us at some way, shape, or form. And then there's people like Cosme, who's leading, you know, Grupo Tortuguero and getting recognized on the national level. So that's a big push. And if you ask me, it's a big part of the solution, not just in ecologically, but also sociologically, social justice in every other way, is having those solutions come from the people that live there. Because the government-based strategies really are not working in Mexico right now. So anything that you're going to do is going to come from the bottom up, and then we can try to get some of those policies to support.
That student still around?
I actually don't know. Yeah, in the back there.
I was curious about other food sources that you find down there, other than fish and the cactus.
Okay, so what curiosity about food sources other than fish and cactus. So the Concac subsisted on a diet of seeds and roots and invertebrates, from ranging from scallops to clams to crabs. There were deer and rabbits. There are deer and rabbits were a part of their diet. Today, the diet is basically centers around fish and then industrially grown agriculture. Rita? Is this okay?
When I was there, we learned a little bit about a linguistics program that's been going on for a long time. And the other question about that is, I had the impression that the Concac language was kind of dying out, but is experiencing a resurgence. Could you put that all in perspective? Because I just was so excited by quiet.
Yeah, sure. So the question is about, Rita was just in Kino with a Border Community Alliance group doing a program with us, and she learned about a linguistic project that's been going on for a long time. And the question is about the vitality, I guess, of the Comcac language, Quinquitum. So Quinquitum is still a very much alive language. For a lot of people, it is still their first language. A lot of the people that we work with learned Spanish in high school, so they didn't learn Spanish until, and they're teaching their children Quinquitum. It wasn't a written language until the 1960s. It was actually Edward Mosier, a missionary, that came down and for the first time wrote the language. And so it's a very orally passed on language. And so passed on through stories, passed on through songs. And embedded in those songs is a lot of traditional ecological knowledge. The songs are about currents, the stars are about songs, the stars are about animals and their behavior, and what fish associates with what bird, right? So that language, those songs are so important to the knowledge that the people have and to ecological knowledge. So as in 1973, they were settled into 2 villages, and so those people don't rely on the land in the same way that they did, and so the younger generations don't necessarily see the need for that type of language or food sources. So in some families it is dying out or it's becoming diluted, and there are several projects to keep that language alive through Renee Montaña, who's at Montaño, I believe, is a Comcac teacher who's teaching the youth not just the language but the stories. And then Carolyn O'Meara, who's a Mexican-American researcher, is working on linguistics, and she has a whole treatise on wind and the different interpretations of wind, and others working on linguistics. Valentina. So she's Valentina is a singer and an herbalist. She knows the plants really well, but mostly she's a craftswoman. She's amazing. She was in a full-length feature film, which I really recommend, called Siete Filos, if you can put your hands on it.
Well, please join me in thanking Lorayne for such a wonderful presentation. Truly, you can see the riches in the biocultural diversity of the Gulf of California. And so just a couple of things. I promised that there would be a sign-up letter to get on Kino Bay's the
so
centers.
if you want to, we don't bombard you. We put out a newsletter every 2 or 3 months. If you'd like to see what's going on, you can sign up for our newsletter. Just put your name and your email, and you'll get a newsletter.
Yeah, so this clipboard's going to stay up here. If you have other questions for Lorayne, feel free to come up and sign up and be in touch that way. And then I also have a few more details to share with you about our trip down to Kino Bay. We will be visiting the center. And again, Tom Fleischner will be one of the hosts on that trip. It will also include Lisa Floyd-Hanna, and I'm sure Lorraine's going to be involved with that heavily as well. So it'll be a fun trip. There's only 11 spots, and this trip is taking place April 17th through April 23rd this coming spring. And so if you're interested, we have made it available on Eventbrite. I do want to share a little bit of a clarification in the pricing, because there are actually 2 different prices for this trip. One, if you're going to share a room, the price is $2,159, very specific. And if you want a private room, it's just a little bit more, it's $2,354. So if you're interested in either one of those, you can place a deposit, which is non-refundable. You can either send us a check or bring a check into us, or save your seat through Eventbrite, and we can be in touch. If you have any other questions for us, I'm available, Tom's available, Jenny Two-Tone's available. So yeah, let's be in touch, and thank you so much for your patience tonight.